My husband filed for a divorce and ghosted me while I was pregnant. 5 years later, my mother-in-law accidentally confessed she had made up the affair. Then his family came for custody of a daughter he had never met. My husband Nathan and I met during our undergraduate years. We became friends first, the way the best relationships often begin, and the friendship turned into something more over the course of time. By the time we married, we had been together for 6 years, 3 years of dating and 3 years of marriage. And looking back, even across everything that happened afterward, I can say honestly that it was a good relationship. Real communication, genuine trust, actual love. I do not believe I invented any of that. I'd always been aware that his mother did not like me. Nathan and I came from different cultural backgrounds. He had been raised in a very different way from me, and his mother was a conservative woman with clear ideas about who her son should be with. The differences between our families were significant in ways that mattered a great deal to her. For Nathan and me, they had never been an issue. We navigated them naturally, without drama, and we married in the way that felt right to both of us, rather than in a way designed to satisfy anyone else. His mother made her feelings visible enough over the years that by the time we were engaged, I had stopped trying to earn her approval. Nathan maintained his relationship with her. I stepped back from that relationship and let him handle it, which had seemed like the sensible arrangement, which is why I was immediately suspicious when she suddenly began reaching out to me directly. Nathan told me not to read anything into it. He said she had simply come around at last, that perhaps the prospect of a grandchild was changing her perspective, that I should give her the benefit of the doubt and not let the past get in the way of a fresh start. I wanted to believe him. Wanting to believe him was something I had a history of, and so I did. I started talking to her. Within a week of those conversations beginning, Nathan changed. I cannot describe it any other way. He became withdrawn, not gradually, not in the way that people change slowly over time, but suddenly and completely. Quiet and burdened in a way that felt like something specific had been placed on him rather than something general wearing him down. I tried many times in those 3 weeks to reach him, to ask what was wrong, to get him to talk to me. I got nothing meaningful back. Then, about 3 weeks after his mother and I first started speaking, I came home from the hospital with the news that I was pregnant. I had taken a test that morning. I was overwhelmed. The particular, overwhelming happiness of a person who has just discovered something enormous and cannot wait to share it. I spent the whole journey home thinking about how to tell him, imagining how his face would look when I did. He was gone when I got there. The first hours were terrifying in a way I struggle to articulate now. My gut told me immediately that this was not ordinary, not a missed call, not someone running late. I went to the police. I told his mother, who looked at me with an expression I cannot fully describe, except to say that it was the expression of someone who knows something and has decided they are not going to say it. I understood in that moment that she knew exactly where he was and exactly why. I also understood that she was never going to tell me. And because of that, and because I could not think clearly enough to know what to do next, I said nothing to her about the pregnancy. The police eventually told me they had found Nathan. He had left voluntarily. He had told them this was his decision. They informed me, with as much gentleness as that information can carry, that I was most likely not going to see him again. I fainted. Sometime later, an envelope arrived with no return address. Inside was a letter and a set of divorce papers. I fainted again. Not from the papers themselves, but from the letter. The letter was long and detailed about something I had not done. It talked about an affair, about my boss, about what Nathan had apparently decided was true. This man had left me, abandoned me while I was pregnant without confronting me once, without asking a single question on the basis of a belief that had no foundation in anything I had actually done. I signed the divorce papers in hospital, where I spent the last month of my pregnancy. The pregnancy was hard throughout, but those final weeks were the most difficult. What came after was a period of real darkness, postpartum depression, grief for a marriage that had ended without a single honest conversation, the exhausting daily work of raising a child entirely alone. My daughter is the reason I kept moving. She was the reason I got out of bed each morning and kept going and did the slow, grinding, painstaking work of putting something back together. 5 years passed. I moved house. I worked. I went to therapy consistently. I made progress in a way I am genuinely proud of, because it was not easy progress and it did not come quickly. I want to be honest that I was not over it. Not fully. There were moments when I missed what we had, or what I had believed we had, and found myself in the unanswerable question of how different things would be if none of it had happened. But I was functioning. I was present for my daughter in the ways she needed. That was what mattered, and that was enough. Then, I ran into his mother. I'd gone back to the old neighborhood to visit a friend who was staying with her parents. My daughter had come with me, and another friend of mine had come along too. We had stopped at the local supermarket first. I was barely through the first aisle when I saw her. She recognized me immediately. We had known each other well enough for that, and walked directly toward me. That surprised me. What she said next surprised me more. Her opening statement, delivered without preamble, was that I should not have cheated on her son. I stood there and let her go. I did not respond immediately because I was somewhere between stunned and furious and not certain which of those was going to take over. She continued for some time, and then, in the middle of a monologue she had built significant momentum behind, she slipped and said something she had apparently not intended to say. She said it had been her. She had told Nathan I was cheating because I looked like someone who would. I looked like someone who would. I have read that sentence many times in my own mind since then, and I still cannot fully accept that it is real. My blood ran cold in a very literal way. I felt it. We argued. My friend arrived in the middle of it, having heard the raised voices, and behind her was my daughter, still laughing about the candy she had been bought. My daughter is Nathan's child in a way that is impossible to miss. The resemblance has always been exact, and anyone who had known him would see it immediately. His mother's eyes went to her, and the expression on her face changed in a matter of seconds. She went silent, then flushed, then looked between my daughter and me with something I can only describe as rapid calculation. What this meant, what the child's existence meant, what my silence about the pregnancy meant. I took my daughter's hand and walked out without another word to her. I thought that was the end of it. I genuinely could not imagine what she would do next. She had just accidentally confessed in a supermarket aisle in front of witnesses that she had invented the entire story that collapsed my marriage and changed the course of my life. What was left for her to do? She gave Nathan my phone number. Within the hour, I had received around 50 messages, not just from Nathan, from family members I had barely known during the marriage itself, people I had met briefly at events, and whose names I had to search my memory for. All of them calling me a terrible person for keeping a pregnancy from him, for hiding his child, for being exactly what his mother had always said I was. I want to be honest about what happened next inside me. The guilt arrived uninvited. Some part of me sitting there reading message after message from people I barely knew calling me a terrible person started to feel it take hold. A quiet internal voice asking whether I had been wrong not to tell him, regardless of everything else, regardless of the papers and the letter and the years of silence. I want to be clear. I did not believe I had done anything wrong. He had left me while I was pregnant, without confrontation, on the basis of a lie his mother had constructed. He had been told I was dead to him and had apparently accepted that. I owed him nothing, but feelings are not always logical, and the guilt arrived regardless, and I want to be honest about that rather than present myself as someone who felt nothing. Update 1. After the volume of advice from people who had read the original post, I agreed to meet Nathan. He flew from Europe, where he had apparently been living for the past 5 years. He looked completely different from the person I remembered. Older in the specific way that real difficulty ages someone, not just time, but weight. He looked tired and depressed and diminished in a way that was hard to square with the man I had known. He told me his version of events. His mother had seen me with my boss on a few occasions and had told Nathan she was certain an affair was happening. That had been enough to light something in him. He had begun watching me obsessively, tracking where I went, what I did, who I spoke to. He had seen me and my boss having lunch together once. Just once. That was the entirety of the evidence. He had spent weeks reading things online about infidelity, feeding the spiral rather than asking me a single direct question, and then made the decision to fly to Europe and rebuild from nothing. He had also cut off his family for a period. 2 years, he said, though not as completely and not as permanently as he had cut off me. He told me he had spent years wanting to come back. He said his ego had been the thing that stopped him. I laughed. Not cruelly, but I laughed because I could not help it. Then I told him everything. How I had come home with a positive pregnancy test on the same day he disappeared. How I had signed divorce papers in a hospital bed in the last month of my pregnancy. The months of postpartum depression, the years of rebuilding my life alone for the sake of a daughter he had not known existed. I watched his face throughout, and I felt something arriving that I had been wanting for years, without quite knowing what form it would take. Something close to closure. He was visibly shaken. He had come, I think, with some image in his mind of what this conversation would look like. A version where I eventually reached for him, where we processed it together, where we both cried and it became something redemptive and mutual. I told him plainly that I could not forgive him. Not because I had not tried, but because what he had done The way he had done it, how completely he had done it, the years, was not something I had been able to arrive at forgiveness for. He looked genuinely surprised, then offended, as though the story he had constructed on the flight over included a version of me that eventually understood. I told him I had to go and pick up my daughter. He started raising his voice as I was getting up from the table and walking away. I did not turn around. Update 2. 2 days after we met, another envelope arrived. Custody papers. Nathan and his mother were filing for full custody of my daughter, the daughter he had never met, who he had not known existed until 3 weeks ago. The panic I felt reading those words was physical and immediate. I booked an appointment with a lawyer the same afternoon. My lawyer was efficient and grounding. The most important practical facts were these. Nathan had never been present in my daughter's life. He was not on her birth certificate. He had lived in another country for the entirety of her 5 years. He had made no contact with me, provided no financial support, given no indication of his existence. Until 3 weeks ago, when his name had appeared on my phone screen approximately 50 times in the space of an hour. The hearing was uncomfortable throughout, but definitive in its outcome. A DNA test was ordered. The results came back positive. My daughter was his. Nathan's expression when the results were read was something I found unexpectedly difficult to watch. Not because I was sorry for him, but because what I saw on his face was the specific expression of someone who has just understood precisely what they threw away. Whatever doubt his mother had planted had apparently never fully resolved itself. The confirmation of paternity was also the confirmation that there had been no affair, that there had been nothing to flee from, nothing that justified any of what he had done. He had rebuilt his entire life on the other side of the world around a story that was not true, and the test result was the moment he could not pretend otherwise. He lost, completely. The absence from her life, the distance, the birth certificate, the history of zero contact, all of it weighed against him in exactly the way my lawyer had prepared me to expect. What happened after the ruling was less expected. He began coming to our house. Not once, more than once. I do not know what version of events he had built in his mind that made this seem like a reasonable thing to do. But he showed up. There is no version of that I had been prepared for. I had prepared myself for hearings and paperwork and difficult conversations in lawyers' offices. I had not prepared for the man I had once loved to arrive at our door uninvited in the dark. My daughter was frightened. I was frightened. After everything, the years of rebuilding, the custody hearing, the restraining order, that fear was something I had not anticipated and did not know how to put down quickly. I applied for a restraining order and it was granted. This is where things stand right now. I have never wanted any of this. Not the custody battle, not the restraining order, not the specific quality of fear that comes from watching someone you once loved become someone you have to protect yourself from. I loved Nathan once. I mourned the loss of what I believed we had for years. I do not recognize who he has become, and I have no interest in finding my way back to him. My daughter is safe. I am working and present and more whole than I thought I would ever be 5 years ago. That is what I am focused on. Not him. Not his mother. Not the question of what our lives would have looked like if she had been a different person. Or if he had been a person who chose to ask me what was actually true, rather than accept the story that confirmed what his ego wanted to believe. He was not brave enough to ask. She was not honest enough to stay quiet. And so we arrived here. My daughter is safe. I keep returning to that as a fixed point. It is the thing that matters most, and it is the thing that is true. Everything else belongs to a chapter I did not choose and am no longer living inside of. The exit was not easy, but I am out.